You're finally ready to buy a house. You've worked for years, you've saved, you've gotten approved for a mortgage, and now you're house hunting with your real estate agent. You look at one house. It's nice. It's within your approved budget. The agent says, this is what you can afford. You could probably go higher. So you look at the next house. It's bigger. It's nicer. It's got the upgrades you didn't know you wanted. It's more than you originally planned to spend, but you can technically afford it. The bank said so. Your income can support it. So you buy it. You move in. You're excited. You're proud. You're a homeowner. You did it. And for the first year or two, it feels great. But then something shifts. The mortgage is higher than you expected to really handle. The property taxes are eating into your budget. The maintenance costs are constant. Something breaks and it costs thousands. And suddenly, you're stressed about money in a way you weren't before. You're working harder just to keep the house. You're not saving. You're not investing. You're not building wealth. You're just paying for the house. And I spend way too much time thinking about this, about how the biggest purchase most people make is also the biggest financial mistake they make. How people buy too much house and spend the next 30 years regretting it. About how this one decision reshapes their entire financial future. Because here's what nobody tells you about buying too much house. It doesn't just cost you the difference in mortgage payments. It costs you everything. It costs your freedom. It costs your future. It costs your peace of mind. Okay, so let's talk about what afford actually means, because I think most people have this wrong. Your bank says you can afford a $500,000 house. That means they'll give you a loan for that amount. But that doesn't mean you should buy a $500,000 house. That just means the bank thinks you can make the payment and repay the loan. The bank doesn't care if that payment means you can't save for retirement. The bank doesn't care if it means you're one emergency away from default. The bank just wants to make sure you'll pay the loan back. So the bank's definition of afford is completely different from your definition of afford, or at least it should be. Just because you can make the payment doesn't mean you should make the payment. Just because the bank will lend you the money doesn't mean you should borrow it. And here's the thing that really gets me. People understand this intellectually, but when they're house hunting, when they're standing in a beautiful house, when the agent is telling them they can afford it, they forget. They let emotion override logic. They let the idea of the house, the identity of being a homeowner of a big, nice house, override their financial common sense. So they buy the house they can technically afford, not the house that makes financial sense. And that's the beginning of the problem. Here's something most people don't calculate before buying a house: the actual total cost of housing, not just the mortgage, everything. A $500,000 house with a 30-year mortgage at 6% interest costs about $1,200 a month in interest alone, plus principal, so maybe $2,200 a month. But that's just the beginning. Property taxes, let's say that's $300 to $500 a month, depending on where you live. Homeowners insurance, $200 a month. Maintenance and repairs. Experts say 1% of the home's value per year. That's $5,000 a year, about $420 a month. Utilities, more than an apartment because it's bigger, $300 a month. HOA fees, if you have them, could be another $300 a month. So now we're at somewhere around $3,500 to $4,000 a month. That's $42,000 to $48,000 a year just to own the house. Now let's compare that to renting. A nice rental apartment might cost $2,500 a month. That includes utilities usually. All the maintenance is the landlord's problem. All the repairs are the landlord's problem. You're just paying rent. So the difference is $1,000 to $1,500 a month. That's $140,000 to $180,000 over a decade. $140,000 to $180,000. That's not just a difference in housing cost. That's your down payment on other investments. That's your retirement savings. That's your financial future. And most people don't realize this. They just see the mortgage payment and think that's what it costs to own a house. Okay, so here's something even bigger than just the cost. It's the opportunity cost. It's what that money could have been doing instead. Let's say you're buying a $500,000 house with a $100,000 down payment. That $100,000, if you invested it instead of putting it down on a house, would grow. At 7% annual return, after 30 years, it would be close to $1 million. So by putting it in your house instead of investing it, you're giving up almost $900,000 in growth. That's not free. That's a real cost. And that's just the down payment. Every dollar you put toward your mortgage instead of investing it has the same opportunity cost. The total cost of that $500,000 house over 30 years, if it were invested instead, could be worth millions. But most people don't think about this. They think of the house as an investment. And sure, the house probably appreciates. A $500,000 house might be worth $600,000 in 10 years. But an investment portfolio with the same amount of money might double or triple. The house is usually not the best investment, but because it's a big, visible, tangible thing, people think of it as an investment, when really it's an expense disguised as an investment. Here's something that happens when you buy too much house. You lock yourself into a lifestyle. Suddenly, you have this big, expensive house. You have an expensive mortgage. You have property taxes. You have maintenance costs. And now you're committed to this. You can't downsize. You can't move. You can't change jobs. You can't take risks because you have to maintain the payment. You're locked in. And that lock eliminates flexibility. Flexibility is one of the most valuable things in your financial life. The ability to change jobs, the ability to take risks, the ability to pivot, the ability to pursue something you actually want to do instead of something that just pays the bills. But when you're locked into a big mortgage, you don't have that flexibility. You have to keep the job, you have to keep the income, you have to keep grinding to service the debt. And that's a cage. That's a cage that you built for yourself when you decided to buy the big house. I knew someone who wanted to start their own business. They had a good idea, they had some savings, but they just bought a big house. The mortgage was too high. They couldn't afford to risk it. So they stayed in their job, they never started the business. Their life took a path that wasn't what they wanted because of the house. That's the real cost of buying too much house. It's the opportunities you don't take, the risks you don't take, the life you don't live because you're locked into paying for the house. Here's something that most people experience but don't connect to their house: the constant low-level financial stress. When your housing costs are too high, when you're stretched thin, when any unexpected expense is a problem, you live in a state of stress. A car breaks down and it's a crisis, a medical bill and it's a catastrophe, a job loss and it's a disaster. And that stress affects your health, it affects your relationships, it affects your ability to think clearly and make good decisions, it affects everything. And most of this stress is caused by housing payments, by a decision you made thinking you'd found the right house at the price you were approved for. The wealthy people I know, the actually financially secure people, they don't feel this stress. Not because they make more money, but because their housing costs aren't a huge percentage of their income. They have breathing room, they have cushion, they have the ability to handle emergencies. And that ability to handle emergencies, that breathing room, is worth more than a bigger house. Way more. Here's another thing that people believe about houses that isn't quite true. The idea that your house is a great investment that will appreciate significantly. Historically, houses appreciate at about 3 to 4% a year. That's the long-term average. That's good, that's better than inflation, but it's not amazing. It's not the return you'd get from a diversified investment portfolio. And more importantly, your house appreciation isn't as good as you think because you're paying all the costs along the way. Taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs. By the time you sell your house, after paying all those costs, your net return might be 2% a year. That's not great. And that's if the house market cooperates, if you buy at the right time and sell at the right time. But most people don't. Most people sell when they need to move, when a job changes, and they end up selling in a down market. So the idea of the house as a guaranteed appreciating asset isn't really true. It's a place to live. It might appreciate, but it's not a sure thing. And meanwhile, you're not investing in things that would definitely appreciate because all your money is tied up in the house. So if not a big, expensive house, what should you buy? What makes financial sense? Buy the least expensive house that meets your actual needs, not your fantasy needs, your actual needs. You need shelter. You need a safe place to sleep. You need a kitchen. You need a bathroom. You need enough space to not feel cramped. You don't need a fancy kitchen. You don't need a guest room. You don't need a big yard. You don't need an impressive house that impresses people. You need a house that you can afford easily, that doesn't stress you out, that leaves you money for other things. And when I say afford, I mean it should be no more than 25 to 30% of your income, not the maximum that the bank will lend you. 25 to 30%. That leaves you breathing room. That leaves you money for savings and investments and the rest of your life. And here's the thing. Once you're 30, 40, 50 years old and you're financially secure, you can upgrade. You can buy the nicer house. You can afford it without stress. You'll actually enjoy it because you're not just grinding to pay for it. But when you're young and you haven't built wealth yet, when you haven't secured your financial future, buying the big, expensive house is putting the cart before the horse. You're celebrating before you've actually won. Let me put this in perspective with some real numbers. Person A buys a $500,000 house with a down payment of $100,000. They spend $4,000 a month on housing. Person B buys a $200,000 house with a down payment of $40,000. They spend $1,800 a month on housing. Person A spends $2,200 more per month than Person B on housing. That's $26,400 a year. Over 30 years, that's $792,000. But it's not just $792,000 that Person A spent on extra housing. It's what that money could have become if Person B invested it instead. If Person B invested that $26,400 a year at 7% returns, after 30 years, they'd have almost $3 million. $3 million. Person A has a $500,000 house, or whatever it's worth. Person B has a $200,000 house plus $3 million in investments. Person B is way more wealthy. Person B has way more financial freedom. Person B can retire earlier. Person B can weather emergencies. Person B wins. And the difference was just buying a less expensive house. I want to give you permission for something. Permission to buy a smaller house than you could afford. Permission to not use the full pre-approval. Permission to not buy the house that impresses people. Permission to be boring with your house choice. Because boring is actually freedom. Boring is financial security. Boring is the path to wealth. Boring is choosing your financial future over the image of your current life. And here's what's interesting. Once you actually build wealth, once you're financially secure, a smaller house is actually perfect. Because you don't need a big house to prove anything. You know you're successful. And a smaller, less expensive house means less to maintain, fewer property taxes, lower stress. The truly wealthy often have modest houses. Not because they can't afford big ones, but because they understand that the big house is a trap, so they avoid it. So here's what I want you to understand. Buying too much house is one of the biggest financial mistakes most people make. And it doesn't just cost you the difference in the mortgage. It costs you your financial future. It costs you your flexibility. It costs you your peace of mind. It costs you the life you could have lived. But you don't have to make this mistake. You can make a different choice. You can buy less house than you're approved for. You can buy a house based on what makes financial sense, not based on what the bank says you can afford. And when you do, when you buy the right amount of house, something shifts. You have breathing room. You have money to invest. You have the flexibility to make choices that matter to you. You have the financial foundation to build real wealth. So the next time you're house hunting, the next time a real estate agent tells you what you can afford, remember this. Remember that affordability isn't determined by what the bank will lend you. It's determined by what leaves you with a healthy financial life. Buy less house, invest the difference, build wealth, enjoy your life. Your future self will thank you. Thank you for thinking through this with me. If this resonated, please share it with someone considering buying a house. And let me know in the comments, how much of your income do you spend on housing? Does it feel sustainable? Thanks for watching.